How's it going, YouTube, and welcome to the first ever game day edition of Game Day Feast. It's another weekend of football here in the US, and today the Baltimore Ravens are going to be taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. So I was talking to my friend Larry Isakoff. He's my best friend from college, and he came up with this awesome idea that we should do a, battle of Baltimore versus Philly, because he's a die-hard Eagles fan. So we decided that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to have a game day tailgate cook-off, socially distanced, because this virus isn't going to keep us from having a good time and making great food. So Larry's going to be preparing his Philly dish, then we're going to come back here and I'm going to be finishing up and preparing my Baltimore dish, and you guys can decide which one's the better one. So I'm going to kick it down I-95 to my best friend from college, Larry Isakoff.
Hey guys, thank you Brian for that great intro. Today, going to be showing you how to make a cheesesteak, a classic Philadelphia favorite, one of my favorite things to eat while watching the Eagles play. So, a few things about the cheesesteak as a sandwich. It is a Philadelphia classic and something everybody in the greater Philadelphia area seems to absolutely love. So just a few things to keep in mind if you've never had a good cheesesteak. Here's what you need to look out for. If someone's calling it a Philadelphia cheesesteak, I'm sorry, that's not a Philly cheesesteak. They're just trying to imitate it. But look, you don't want to go and get that cheesesteak and say it's a Philly cheesesteak. Every cheesesteak shop that is good just calls it a cheesesteak. So there are a few things to be said with the cheesesteaks when you're in Philadelphia. If you're visiting, well, Pat's, Geno's, that's always a big, oh, who's better argument. And look, I'm not saying either of them are bad. They're both great places to get a cheesesteak. I'm going to let you know, most Philly natives, they're not going to Pat's or Geno's. They're going somewhere else. Because Pat's and Geno's, that's kind of the tourist thing to do now. Pretty much anywhere in Philadelphia, it's a tough city. I mean, it's a city that brought us gritty. So, if you're going to be saying you're making a good cheesesteak in Philadelphia, you better be making a good cheesesteak if you want to stay in business. Let's talk about what makes a good cheesesteak. First and foremost, most important ingredient, the rolls. You must get fresh rolls. Every place I know that does cheesesteaks, they get their rolls every day. They're delivered every day fresh. You don't want day-old rolls. You don't want something you found on the supermarket discount spot, because they're a little old. Save that older bread, that staler bread, for garlic bread. For a cheesesteak, you want fresh rolls. Omarosa's preferred. Most places in Philadelphia use Omarosa rolls. The next thing we're going to talk about is the meat. So, as you can see here, I've really thinly sliced this meat. So it's going to be pretty easy to chop up as I'm cooking it. So let's actually get that warming up right now so the pan can be nice and hot when I'm ready for it. And we'll talk about that in a second. So that you want a good cut of steak, you want thinly sliced. I wouldn't be buying that like pre-packaged, like, oh, choose steak meat things. No, just go to the meat aisle, find like really thin slice, nice cut of meat, and I did a little extra slice into it. Just make it extra easy to chop up. So when you do that, you're also, some people like veggies. Now I did some small diced mushrooms because that's what I like. A lot of people go with onions. Some people like peppers too. One thing I will say, you want to get small dice on them because you want it, look, the cheesesteak, the meat's very chopped up. You want your sliced veggies to have a similar size to the meat. Now, like I said, every good cheesesteak shop, I'm heating up my cast iron. They usually have a flat iron. I haven't seen a good cheesesteak shop that isn't operating off of a nice, well-seasoned flat iron grill. I don't have that at home, so I have this nice cast iron skillet. Now, some people may be a little intimidated by using one. They're really not so bad to maintain and all that. Seasoning is a little bit of a pain, I'm not gonna lie. When I first got it, you know, I grabbed my olive oil, I coated the entire thing, top and bottom, in olive oil, flipped it upside down, put it on a baking sheet, and baked it in the oven at 450 for about an hour. Now, one thing I will caution you when you do this, please make sure you have your ventilation on for your stove, and please, if you have windows, doors that you can open them. It is going to get smoky. Don't smoke yourself out with seasoning your pan, but you know, you can use different things in olive oil. I've read a little bit about it. You know, I've heard like different oils will give you a little bit different of flavors, but olive oil's perfectly fine. This is getting nice and hot. It is well seasoned. I will quickly talk about it, so I'm letting it heat up just a little bit longer. How I clean it. So cleaning is not so bad. What I do is I grab some coarse sea salt. I sprinkle it in the pan once the pan has cooled down. Once the pan is all the way to room temperature, I grab a sponge. This is a dedicated sponge I have just to this, and I just scrub it with the salt in it. The salt is great because if you have like burnt on bits or stuck on bits, the salt in the sponge will help get that up, and the salt also helps absorb some of that excess grease you may have. I just rinse it out with water, flip it upside down to dry because you don't want the water to dry on this. So, this pan feels nice and hot, so let's get going. So I'm going to take my meat, just put it in the pan. I'm also going to throw in my mushrooms as well. That's a sizzle I want to hear. Throw in some mushrooms. I'm just going to quickly wash my hands while that starts to saute. As that's going, I did already season this with salt and pepper. That's why you're not seeing me mess with it too much. I did pre-cut my roll because one of the things is once this is all ready to go, I am going to put the cheese right on top of this and put the roll right on top of it as well. So there we go. It is sauteing up nicely. Should cook pretty quick between the thin cuts and all of that. This isn't chopping up the meat as nice as I was hoping, but it's still going to make for a good cheesesteak. I personally love when all the meat just starts falling apart and it is just very similar consistency to the diced veggies. But this is cooking up well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make this into its own pile. That pile will get topped with cheese when it's ready, and it's going to be ready just to plop the bun, or not the bun, the roll right on top. So you're just going to pick it up and flip it over, everything inside it already. So there we go. This is looking good. There we go. There we go. Now, using the two spatulas, it's helping anchor the meat to help it chop and dice a little bit finer. It's not as fine as I usually like it, but it will make do. You know, good cheesesteak shops, they usually get it pretty well chopped up. I thought this spatula honestly did have a sharper edge to it, as many of the places on the flat iron will be using spatulas to chop it up as they cook. Mine just aren't. There we go. The meat is cooking a little more and being a little more cooperative with that. So as we see, this meat is really starting to look good, starting to brown nicely. So I'm going to start trying to aim to get my pile going, because that pile is going to get topped with my cheese and the roll. So, you know, Eagles Ravens this weekend. Hope the Eagles show up to play. You know, it's been a disappointing season so far as an Eagles fan. I just could not believe the other week we were actually on top of the NFC East after being 1-2-1. That was something that truly shocked me, that a one-win team was on top of a conference. NFC East isn't looking so good this year, but you know, we'll see how they handle the Ravens. They actually did a decent job against the Steelers. Just couldn't finish much. There we go. So I got my steak in a nice pile with my mushrooms. This is looking pretty well cooked to me. So what I'm going to do is just top it with the provolone. Now the cheese, I didn't talk about that yet. I just realized I'm using provolone. A lot of places, you know, the Philly stereotype is the whiz. And you know what? The whiz, it's a fun thing. You know, it's that, okay, let's take this big, gooey glob of cheese and just slather it on top. And it's fun to look at, and, you know, it's a fun thing. But most places, they're using American cheese. And, they will offer provolone, so I'm seeing this provolone is already getting nice and melty and gooey, just like I like it. Now, I personally chose provolone for my cheesesteak for a very simple reason. If I want to put ketchup on my cheesesteak, and sometimes I do, provolone for me works really well because it helps cut the sweetness of the ketchup. So, you know, ketchup, it's not needed, it's not required, but again, it's something sometimes people enjoy. So I'm going to put the roll flat down on this, give it a minute, because I did see I wanted to get that cheese to melt just a little bit more before I try and take it out of the pan. So I don't have the long spatulas like a lot of cheesesteak places have. So what I'm probably going to do is I'm probably going to flip it in the pan. I don't mind if my roll gets a little bit of grease on the bottom. It's only going to make it a little tastier. But most places have a very long spatula that they can get under the entire thing before they flip it over. For me, I'm just going to use my two spatulas here. Let's see, I think, oh yeah, that cheese is sticking good to my pan. So let's see, flip it over. Oh. Okay, a little bit fell out because my spatulas were not big enough, but I'm just going to put that in there. Usually you don't do it that way. Usually you're hoping to get it all to come out at once. Now my cheesesteak might be a little lighter on meat than some like. That is hot with that grease. But there we go. You know, as you see, didn't take too long to cook. I'm probably going to make another one for my wife in a moment. But there we go. So what I'm going to do is I let that cool before a taste test. I'm going to grab my knife. Most cheesesteak places love to cut these in half. And you know what? I'm a sucker for that. So as you can see, that inside got a nice little bit of gooey cheesiness to it. I just have to let this cool off. before I taste test, because that is straight off of the pan. That's it. That is good. So, you know, all those little tips and tricks, I just learned that by watching people cook them at cheesesteak shops. You know, I see them always using a flat iron. I always see them do this and that. Because most places have pretty open kitchens that are doing cheesesteaks, so you can kind of watch them do it. I know I did not time how long I cooked it. That was good. You know, I usually just eyeball how the meat looks. From my experience, usually it's about 4 to 5 minutes. So, you know, hopefully the Eagles show up and play as good as this cheesesteak tastes. So let's head back up I-95 to Brian in New Jersey and see what he has for his Baltimore-inspired dish. Go Eagles.
Thanks, Larry. That looks delicious. I love a good Philly cheesesteak, but today I'm here representing the city of Baltimore, despite the fact that I live in New Jersey, and I'll give you guys a little bit of background about that soon. But to get us started, we're going to take a look at this awesome beef roast that I have here. So this is a beef round, and it's a 5-pound roast that I purchased yesterday because the process actually starts the day before. But let's take a look really quickly here. We've got everything going in the smoke box. We want to be around 225, 250, so I'm hovering a little high. I'm just going to close up that grate. And then I'll leave that open for the moment, and we'll just watch that temperature. Looks like it's already going down a little bit. So when it comes to this roast, what we're going to be making sure that we need to do is start preparing it the night before. So what I did is I took salt, large amount of salt. I rubbed the whole thing down, right? We're not going to put the salt into the dry rub. We want to make sure that the salt is the first thing to permeate the meat. It's going to help make it tender and bring out a lot of that great beef flavor. What we then did is made a herb and seasoning paste. So what we do is take equal parts rub and water, and we mix that together. It turns into this, you know, nice paste, almost like softened butter. And then we rub the meat in it. So what I have is about 2 tablespoons of black pepper, a tablespoon of smoked paprika, and about 2 teaspoons each of thyme and rosemary, and then about a teaspoon of chili powder. Mix that up in a shaker, throw it in with some water, and then we rub down the meat. And we're gonna let this sit overnight. So I've already taken care of that process. If you guys want a demo, I can totally do that in a short other video. So let's take a look again here. So we have the beet ready to go. You can see that I've basically covered the whole thing. Of course I missed one spot, because why would anything want to be perfect when I'm filming? And now what we need to do is just really get it onto the grill. So, and we see that temperature is coming down, which is perfect. So we're going to lift that up, smoke comes out. Okay, and now we're just going to pick this up. You could use the tongs, but I feel like being a savage today. And then we want to throw it on the grill, close to the smoke. And you want the larger end facing you. This one, as you can see, is a bottom round, it's tapering off. I'm going to use a probe thermometer today. It's not really how long we're going to cook it as far as a time, it's a temperature. So I have mine set for about 140. It's going to give us somewhere between a medium rare and a medium. So we have this probe, and we want to put it into the middle of the largest part of the roast, and we're going to drive that in. And then this is made with a metal lining that's going to keep it from melting, so we don't have to worry about that. We close her up, and we can see right now the beef's only at 39 degrees. And this has an alarm in it. When we hit 140, it's going to let me know. So really now, all we're doing is playing the watch the temperature game. It's 34 degrees in New Jersey right now. You can see how quickly my temperature dropped. So I already have a second chimney of charcoal going, just in case I need that, because I have to bring that temperature back up. But we can see it's rising already. So I'm gonna go wash up and then I'll be back and we'll talk a little bit about the history of pit beef and why I chose this dish. See you guys soon. All right, so we're getting the temperature back up. I'm trying to battle the fall New Jersey weather right now. It's about 36 degrees and it's almost 9 o'clock in the morning. So my temperature is almost back at 225, but I do have another chimney of charcoal going. I'm gonna add that into the smoke box. It's nice and hot. So, a little bit about Baltimore pit beef. Right, Chaps is probably the place best known in Baltimore to go get your pit beef, but there's plenty of places that do it, and to a degree it's barbecue, but it's not what we would necessarily refer to as like our standard American barbecue. So we have that wet rub on it, or that paste anyway. And how's the temperature? Gonna open that back up a little bit, get more of that airflow, right? So what we're gonna end up doing is actually what we call the reverse sear. So we're gonna cook it low and slow and watch that temperature. We're already up to 43 degrees from that 39, and it's been on there maybe 10, 15 minutes, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna get it to our temperature, then we're gonna add some charcoal, and we're gonna actually sear it on some direct heat to get that crust that we want. And if you've never had pit beef before, this is probably a terrible comparison, but think like a really good Arby's sandwich, right? It's meaty, you have it on a nice fresh bun, and it's everything that you want and nice and juicy, right? If you're a fan of Arby's, no shame in that. I admittedly do like an Arby's sandwich. So, we have that temperature going, and what we want to be thinking about then really is just watching that temperature and just keeping an eye on the meat as it's starting to cook. Maybe we'll flip it if we need to, if we see that the top really isn't cooking, but the bottom is. That's looking delicious. So the reason I chose pit beef, number one, since we're doing this battle today, my thought was doing a crab cake to represent Maryland is kind of like comparing apples and oranges with Larry doing a cheesesteak. So we figured this is battle of the beef, right? It's one of those sandwiches, you can actually get it on Ravens Walk. If you've ever been to Baltimore, to M&T Bank Stadium, they have this really long sidewalk leading up to the front of the stadium where they have basically a block party before every home game. I go at least once every summer to a preseason game with one of my best friends, Colin Tessier, and that's where I tried my first pit beef sandwich. So what I'm gonna do as we get this closer to temperature is starting to think about those other components of the dish. We have to make sure that we have the right bun. We're gonna toast that up on the grill a little bit. We're gonna get some onion. I'm actually gonna throw that on the grill just to give it a little bit less of a bite, right? And put together this perfect sandwich. All right, so the temperature of the barbecue is looking great. So what we're gonna end up doing now is just adding a few more smoke chips. Let's take a look. So we're right around 250. Again, 225 to 250 is what we want here. So we're gonna grab our bag of smoke chips. I'm using mesquite again. I'm a creature of habit. We're just gonna open up the grate. You can see all that lovely charcoal. Big old handful, drained, right on top of the wood. You can hear that sizzle. And momentarily, we're going to see the smoke already start billowing out. We'll just leave that there. The heat's already coming, and the sun's out in New Jersey, so it's starting to warm up. So as we wait for the smoke to get going again, and again, just like we did with the chicken last week, we want to make sure that we're adding all that smoke flavor in the front half of the cook. Right now, we're probably about an hour in or so. And I'm watching that temperature. We're at a nice 70 degrees now. And again, we're shooting for 130, 140. So we got that going. You can already see the smoke coming out. The question then became, and I get to ask this all the time living in New Jersey, how are you a Baltimore Ravens fan? The story is actually pretty simple. Growing up, one of my best friends that lived down the street was a Patriots fan. I loved Drew Bledsoe. Then Tom Brady showed up, and he was never my cup of tea, even in middle school. So for a few years, I went without a team. My dad and my brother loved the Steelers. My mom loves the Jets. This is Steelers, Jets, Giants, and Philadelphia country. But as I started realizing I love literature, I realized that the Baltimore Ravens are named after Edgar Allan Poe's poem. Eventually I went on to become an English teacher. So it was just perfect. And when I went to the University of Delaware, Joe Flacco was our college quarterback who went on to play for the Ravens. That was even another reason to root for them. So they've been my team ever since, and through the good and the bad. And right now, things are looking really good for the team. I hope that they continue to work well. I'll check back in with you guys soon, and we'll talk a little bit more about finishing up this sandwich. All right, so it's been about 2.5 hours, and at this point, it's time for us to really check that meat. I'm hitting right around 135 degrees, which is right where I want to be. I said 135, 140. I'm going to pull it off a little bit early, just because I'm going to let it rest for a bit. We're going to get that direct heat going. So let's take a look. Right. So the oven temperature has gone down just a little bit on the grill, but that's okay. So we're going to pull the probe out, and it's not too hot. There we go. We're going to rest that right there. Good, but we're going to use that again in a little bit. So you can see what ends up happening with that paste that we've made is it's made this really nice crust on the meat, and it's all solidified, right? So I'm giving it a little bit of a squeeze clearly, and you can see there's some juice that's even coming out of where the probe was. That's perfect. So we're going to get this off the grill temporarily. It's going to go back on very soon. So I have my tongs and I have a big grill fork. Right. I'm going to try not to stab the meat because I don't want to let those juices out. So if I can get it with the tongs and then use this more as a spatula. And if you have a big grill spatula, that works too. I'm going to set that on the cutting board. I can feel that it's still nice and juicy, but that crust is really solidified on there. We'll take a look at that in a second. But right now, we're going to take one of these grates and we're going to lift it up. It's made to create that direct heat. There we go. Make sure those are closed. Going to grab my grill glove. Make sure you never pick up a hot chimney without the glove on. You're going to burn yourself. White hot. Exactly what I'm looking for. Okay. So we're going to put that down. We're going to get our grate back where it needs to be. Okay. So now this is going right back on the grill. This is what we talked about, that reverse sear. So we want to get that crust on the meat even crustier. And there's a sizzle right there. So let's take a closer look at what we're looking at. So you can see those white hot coals, the meat's directly over it. We're going to go about 3 to 5 minutes per side. And we just want to take this nice bark that we've already created, right? And we want to really toast that up and make it, just extra crispy so that we get that contrast of texture from the really soft meat on the inside. That should be a nice medium rare to medium, which is where I like to serve it. So we're going to keep giving this a go, and then we'll pull this off, we'll let it rest, and then we'll get to slicing and have an awesome meal. All right, so I just made the first turn, right? Now it's time to start talking about that onion. So I'm going to take off the end like usual, and then we're going to split this in half, right through the root end. This is the same thing that we do all the time, in basically every episode of the show. And then that peel's coming off. Good. Now here's the thing, right? If we slice this now, just like we did earlier with the chicken, it's going to be really hard to get it off the grill. So I'm going to kiss this on the grill exactly as is, but this time I'm going to take it through slices for a sandwich, so I don't need to cut toward the root end. We're going to toss that on. I'm going to take the roast, and we're standing it up vertically here, and we can see we got some flames going. That's perfectly okay as well. That's just juices. So you can see there, that's okay, and we can see that the coals are close to the meat. So we just need to make that judgment call about what we want to do as far as when we're going to flip it. Onion's doing its thing. It's been on there for what, 30 seconds maybe, and we're already getting some grill marks. We'll put that even closer to the coals. Cool, so we're gonna let this go another minute. We're gonna pop it off the grill, and then it's gonna be time to let it rest and start slicing. It's a quick moving process at the end. There's so little cooking to do during the process that we just have to be ready to move quickly. So what we're gonna do at this point is grab our tongs. We have this nice and seared, and we're taking that roast right to the cutting board. And now this might be the most important step. Don't touch it for 5 to 10 minutes. We have to let it rest. We have to let those juices redistribute. To show you what I mean, you can even see here, especially if I get out of the light, there's still smoke that's coming off of some of the char, right? And that is very hot. We need to let those juices go back into the meat. We have our onion over here as well, which is probably nice and charred on this side at this point. Just gonna give that a flip, put it right where the beef was. Give that its char as well. All right, it's been about 5 minutes, so there's a few things we need to do now as we're starting to put the sandwich together. That being said, we got a nice sharp butcher's knife ready to go. But before we start slicing, because I know you want to dive in, we have this nice fresh Kaiser roll that we had baked locally. So I'm gonna take this and slice this in half. And I'm gonna kiss this on the grill. Don't leave it too long or it's gonna get charred. So now for the beef. Nice long strides. And there's a lot of debate here about how you should serve this meat, right? Some people believe that it should be machine cut. Some people believe that it should be hand cut. Some people believe that there's onions or no onions. They believe there should be sauce or no sauce. Some people will eat it on white bread. Other people only eat it on a roll. But the classic, the traditional, is to serve it on a hard roll, which is what we're going to do. And we're just slicing this nice and thinly. We've got some good slices. Let's take this right down the middle and show you what we're working with here. So we're going to go for the big reveal. We pull it across, nice and pink. You can see the juices running in there. We give it a little squeeze and they're oozing out. All this juice on the board, that's called flavor. It's time for the assembly. We have our onion, thinly sliced. Now I like to take them and I'm going to drop them into the juices on the board to just give them more of that pit beef flavor. Okay. We have our nice thin slices. Gonna add just another one or two. As thinly as you can. And we have our roll. Little over toasted, but I can live with that. And we're going to layer this beef on there. You can feel the crust on there, right? It's really soft, juicy meat. And a little bit of that crunchy crust from the meat. I'm gonna throw another slice or two on. Nice and hearty. Grab those onions, soften just a little bit, soaking up all that delicious juice. Okay. And now we're going to serve this with some simple sides. But I'm going to wash my hands, or wipe them anyway really quickly. So, I have an organic watermelon here. I'm thinking barbecue, that's like summer season. We're still getting organic watermelons delivered to us. So I figured, why not? Let's take a little bit of summer as we're heading into fall. Take off our end and our end. But you guys know how to slice a watermelon. I'm just going to take a nice, like, inch slice. In half and in quarters. We'll take 2 slices of the watermelon. We'll move you out of the way. Then we're going to take some potato chips. Kettle potato chips, in my opinion, are the best. One of the best memories I have growing up with my family, my dad and my brother and I would call them the special chips when I was younger. We would get a few cans of canned sardines and eat them on Ritz crackers. It's one of my favorite things in the world. And we would get the kettle chips in the purple bag. And for me, that was just, it was going to be a great afternoon when my dad, my brother, and I would sit down and we would have these. So we have this delicious looking pit beef. We're going to move this out of the way. And we're going to dive in for a taste. All right, here we go. Picking this thing up nice and big. All right, you can see the juice is dripping off. The meat is nice and tender, and you get the salt and those herbs. We sliced it thinly and nice and perfectly. There's a little bit of spice, a little bit of char. It's everything that you could want in a really nice beef sandwich. And it reminded me so much of going to the game in Baltimore. I'm gonna follow it up with some nice watermelon. And the sweetness just brightens everything up. You could add some sauce. You could do what you need to do to make it your sandwich. Add some barbecue sauce or something. This is perfect Maryland style pit beef, and I'm sorry, I need a moment alone with this sandwich. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow me on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook. Right, let me know what you guys think. Make sure you watch the game later today. It's the Baltimore Ravens versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Thank you so much to my friend Larry Isakoff for joining me today. And remember, as long as you have some great food and a lot of great friends, you're always going to have a fantastic game day feast.